Hello all. Before we begin the video, let's discuss CloudFoundation. CloudFoundation is the premier online training platform to help individuals and organizations gain knowledge and skills in the ever-growing cloud computing industry. In this tutorial video we will discuss about Saviynt. Saviynt is an identity and access management system that provides organizations with a comprehensive set of tools to secure, manage and govern access to their data and applications. It offers features such as identity management, single sign-on, adaptive authentication, access control, directory services, and more. The topics covered in this video are IDM Saviynt User Lifecycle Custom Connector, Import Users, Onboard Application, Workflows, Cloud Access Governance and Intelligence. And finally, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel and check out other videos related to the latest technologies on our CloudFoundation channel. Contact us at India, USA, UK, sales@cloudfoundation.com. Let's get started.
Now what we'll be talking about is the various aspects of identity and access management and also specific to Saviynt, right? So if you remember yesterday we were talking about that we need a central identity and access management software to manage the user's access throughout their life cycle. So we had an HR system who were creating the user's identity. We had our identity and access management tool. And from there, we were managing access to various applications, right?
Yeah.
So there is a very important term in this. Okay, so obviously we had one system from where identities were getting created. So within the industry right now, if you remember, we also did talk about something called as Active Directory.
Yes.
Active Directory is an application which was being used prior to other tools in terms of managing users and their accesses. But what happened was because it is being used for such a long time, nowadays we use Active Directory for a slightly different purpose.
Okay.
Because everyone in the industry is so accustomed to Active Directory, we basically connect our identity and access management tool, that is Saviynt in our case,
Okay.
to Active Directory to get existing users' data.
Okay.
Because it is obvious, right? So what happened is, let's say for a company, there is a new IDM implementation that they want to do, right?
Okay.
Which case is Saviynt. So they want to do a new Saviynt implementation. So obviously, I mean, going forward, we can start managing users and their accesses through Saviynt. But there are already 25,000 users who are part of the company. So for managing their data, we'll have to do something, right? We cannot. It is not a, as they call it, it is not a greenfield implementation. It is a existing implementation which is already there. So what we do as part of cybersecurity experts is that we basically tell them that, okay, what we'll do is you already have an Active Directory. It is not necessary that it has to be Active Directory all the time. It could be any different software as well. There is one which is called as Workday.
Okay.
There is another one which is called as SuccessFactors. So these are all HR management tools. Okay. So the HR guys create the user's identity there, right? And from there, we can pick up the new hire information and pull it into Saviynt. Okay. And from there, we can provision data to any of the target applications that we wanted to create their accounts in. So yesterday we were discussing about Outlook. We did talk about Salesforce, Box, and rather than Teams, let's say we have payroll management, let's say SuccessFactors. Okay, let's keep it away from here. Okay, so right now what is happening is you have your Workday, then you have Saviynt, and then you have all other applications that you're dealing with. So because Active Directory or Workday is the so yesterday in our example I discussed with you that the same identity, let's say your own data will be stored with different departments.
Okay.
Admin department will have your data. Your IT department will have your name and your other details. Your HR department will have your other details, because there are multiple departments which together runs a company, right? But
Yes.
let's say tomorrow, if there is a ambiguity in your data, three of the departments says that okay, the data that I have about Deepa is correct. The fourth one will say, no, no, the data that you have is not correct. The data that I have is correct. In case of such ambiguity, what will happen is the HR systems, whatever data the HR systems hold, would be considered the most exact. Okay.
Okay.
So in case of ambiguity, the HR data is termed to be exact, because obviously they are managing the entire human resources capital of the company, right? And that is why usually this AD is also called as the HR source. They call it as the HR source, or authoritative source, or trusted source. Okay.
Yeah.
So the terminology keeps on changing based on the tool that you're using. So that's why we are, I'm telling you all the possible names that we give to these systems. We give this name because obviously we are saying that this database has the most updated and the most correct information about the user.
Okay.
And and if you understand even by the literal meaning of it, when you are creating a new hire from Active Directory and pulling that information into Saviynt, it is called reconciliation.
Okay.
And because in this case we are doing it from a trusted system, it is called as a trusted reconciliation. Okay. And then we are also creating, or rather pushing, these created identities into the target application. So in day-to-day scenarios within companies, how it works is there is a new user which got hired. We created their identity was created in the Active Directory or Workday by the HRs, and from there we push this information into Saviynt. Rather, Saviynt pulls this information from Active Directory, and then based on the department, based on the designation, or based on many other rules, uh, we create identity of the user, or we create the user's account into Salesforce, Box, SuccessFactors, Outlook, as per the need. Okay. So even if you look at from a day-to-day perspective, when we create our identity in, let's say, Facebook, we call it as a Facebook account, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Similarly, a Gmail account. So and if you would have seen, at times it happens that there are some applications, like let's say Flipkart. Flipkart will say that if you already have a Google account, you can create, you can use the same identity to log in, right? I don't remember if really Flipkart offers that capability, but many other applications does. They say
Okay.
that if you already have a Gmail account, if you already have an Apple account, you can use the same account to log into my application, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, they become a trusted source, right?
Yeah.
So what we're saying here is that this process of pulling the information of the new hires is called as reconciliation, and pushing this information into the target system is called as provisioning. So provisioning means creating the account of the users into target systems, okay, through our identity management platform. So this is all that basically you need to know. Okay, this is how the entire IDM application works.
Okay.
Complete life cycle. Okay. Now there is another point that there could be one more scenario. So as I mentioned that there was an existing system. So
Okay.
let's say you were part of TCS, and TCS did an engagement of Saviynt implementation.
Okay.
Okay. So implementation means that before Saviynt got involved with the company, there was no identity management tool that the company had, right?
Okay.
And we are the ones who are doing implementation for them of Saviynt. So
Okay.
what we'll have to do, we'll also have to reconcile existing data of existing users. So let's say the company is Hindustan Unilever, Hindustan Unilever also already have 25,000 users as part of their company, right?
Okay.
And that data today is either lying in Active Directory or Workday, right?
Okay.
Any of this could be the existing application. So what we'll do is, and now we are saying that going forward, everything will be managed by Saviynt. But we
Yeah.
will also have to understand that, okay, the 25,000 first user, let's say, right, would be
Yeah.
through Saviynt. Why? That doesn't mean that we won't be handling these 25 users' data, because obviously these guys might also be switching between departments, right? Some of them might leave the company, right? So we are going to manage everything from Saviynt, and that is
Okay.
why we will reconcile this data into Saviynt, so that now all these 25,000 users will be managed through Saviynt. If they
Okay.
leave the company, their accesses would be taken away. If they change department, their department would be updated, and so will there be accesses across applications. There would be some application access which would be taken away. There would be some application access that we will be providing to them, right? But that is how we want this to get managed going forward, right?
Okay.
That is why we do reconciliation. So if the user data exists in Active Directory, obviously some of these users might already being using Outlook as well. They might be using already Salesforce as well, right?
Yeah.
Because we are new to the company. The company in itself is not new, right?
Yeah.
That is why we do not only create new users account in these target applications. We also need to know which users already have that account, right? So
Yeah.
we know that, okay, there must be 12,000 users out of the 25,000 which already have an account in Salesforce. So
Yeah.
we need to reconcile that data as well. And that is also called as reconciliation. But now Salesforce is not a trusted target, because it is Salesforce is usually only used by the sales guys, right? Or let's say some senior guys, not by everyone. And specifically not by HR people. And
Yeah.
that is why it is not called as trusted reconciliation. Okay. It is called as target reconciliation. And it is fairly simple to understand. Okay, even if you're not able to understand it right now, it is fine, because eventually when we start discussing more technical topics, you'll get an understanding yourself. Okay,
Yeah.
but right now I'm just trying to give you a overall perspective from a architectural perspective, that what are we trying to achieve and what are we doing. This is enough. Okay,
Okay.
this is enough. So we have discussed that this is my identity and access management implementation. I have an authoritative or trusted source, because it is an HR source I consider to be the source of truth. I will create user identities in Saviynt using this tool, but I also will reconcile some data from target applications such as Salesforce, Box, SuccessFactors, for the users who are already using these applications from the last few years, right? Because going forward, what I want to do is that going forward, no one will create new identities, or sorry, new accounts within the target application in itself. If you need access to Outlook, you will come to me and you will tell that I need access to Outlook, and I, as an IDM administrator, will create that account. Or I will automate the process, that let's say if your designation is consultant and your department is sales, then you get access to Salesforce. This is an automatic rule that I can configure, according to which you will get access to Salesforce. But everything now, the Salesforce administrator will not create an account directly in Salesforce. An Outlook administrator need not create any new accounts in Outlook. Or everything of those sort would be taken care by the IDM tool, that is Saviynt in our case. Okay.
Okay.
So no one needs to do it separately. It's not like that. Otherwise, there is no use of Saviynt, right?
Yeah.
If every administrator is doing it at themselves. And that is why, as a one-time activity, we need all this information in Saviynt, so that going forward I can start managing it from my end, rather than everyone managing it separately. This will remove ambiguity. This will reduce the probability of a security threat or hacking attempts like that, right? Because
Yeah.
everything is now being managed by a central point. Just give me a second, I'll play. So this is one thing that we discussed. Now the next thing that we need to discuss is, so again, we'll go back and we'll try to understand from an engagement perspective, that when you'll start doing a Saviynt engagement or a Saviynt job, what exactly would you be doing? Okay.
Okay.
So one point is that we will configure Saviynt for the client. Okay. So that going forward, rather than managing all these processes of creating accounts, disabling accounts remotely, we will be able to do that from a single point. Okay.
Okay.
And So this is a very important term which is called as a JML process. JML, which means joiners, movers, and leavers. Okay.
Okay.
So we would be monitoring or managing the people who will be joining the company, who will be moving to different departments and designation, and then who will be leaving the company. We want to manage the entire user lifecycle. So this is actually, this JML process is actually called as the user lifecycle. Because obviously, apart from this, you actually cannot do anything within a company, right? Even if you grow to the level of vice president or CEO, ultimately you are switching departments or designations. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? And at the end, everyone actually leaves the company. So this is how it will work. And that is what is called as user lifecycle. So what
Yeah.
is identity and access management? Identity access management is the process of managing the user's access from the time they join the organization to the time they leaves it. Okay. We are just trying to manage their access. So within this implementation, one part is installing. So what you will be doing if you look at this process, what will we be doing? Obviously, we'll have to install the product, which is Saviynt, right?
Yeah.
Second is connect Saviynt to all these applications we have talked about. We will have to connect Saviynt to Active Directory. We will have to connect Saviynt to Outlook, SuccessFactors, whatever applications the company is using. We'll have to load the user data into Saviynt, right?
Yeah.
And then we will implement some advanced concepts. Okay, implement new requirements. So see, apart from what we have discussed, there could be some other requirements from the company or from the client as well. They might say that, okay, I want to also can your product also do this, also do that. So those are newer or additional requirements that can come across your way. So for that, you need to know what are the capabilities of Saviynt. Okay, what it can do, what it cannot do. So we'll have to, let's say, implementation of new capabilities or advanced capabilities. Okay. And then you hand it over. So you hand it over to a support team. You yourself can be the support team as well, but that's a different topic. I'm just trying to explain you from a life cycle perspective on how an engagement works. Before this, actually, you'll have elaborate requirements gathering session, but I was just talking from Saviynt's perspective, right?
Okay.
Otherwise, obviously, you'll have requirement gathering sessions. You'll document those requirements, both in terms of functional requirements. You'll be actually converting business requirements into functional requirements and then that into technical requirements. Okay.
Yeah.
So the business guys from the client's end will only tell you what they need, but they might not tell you it in a very defined fashion, right? So you'll have to so you'll have to understand their requirements in terms of what is the business requirement and then convert it into functional requirement, take a sign off, okay, from them. So that, okay, so what you will tell is that, okay, I had multiple sessions with your team. So let's say you will interact with manager level people a lot, right?
Yeah.
They will be reporting into directors who will be reporting into vice presidents.
Yeah.
So to make them clear that we are following the process, we will do requirement gathering sessions with the respective teams. They will tell us, okay, this is what we want, this is what we want. We will convert it into functional requirements. Let's say we have 200 functional requirements. We will send a functional document to them again and tell them that, okay, this is what we understood from your requirements and this is what we are going to deliver. Are you okay with it? Once they say that yes, they are okay with it, that is something we call it as a sign off. Okay. So now we start building, because if we start building ahead of time like this, the way I was explaining you, later on they will change their requirements over and over again. Okay. Or they might tell us that, okay, you did not do it this correctly, you do not do that correctly. That is something we don't want.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to do is, once all these things are done, we will install Saviynt. We will connect Saviynt to different applications. We will load the user data into Saviynt. We will implement any new requirements that they might have, and then we hand it over to the support team. The support team can be from our company or from the client.
Yeah.
Whomsoever they want to hand it over to, and then we are done, right?
Yeah.
So if you compare, if you think about it from a logical perspective, it is not that difficult, right? It is actually easy, and that is why in general Saviynt is easy, right? Because you have very specific points that you want to deliver as part of your engagement. Okay. So as we go ahead, once we have already talked about Saviynt quite a bit, I will also talk about accelerators. Accelerator means what is a thing which will actually keep you ahead of others, okay, which
Yeah.
will be differentiating for you as compared to others. We'll talk about that later. But anyways, so this is something that we have discussed. Now let's discuss how do you start doing this thing? How do you install Saviynt? How do you connect Saviynt? And slightly also, what is the architecture of Saviynt itself? Okay,
Yeah.
and we'll start getting into nitty-gritties of it. So see, one of the things that we did not discuss yesterday was we compared Saviynt with other tools, but we left a very important topic there.
Yeah.
We did not discuss that how is Saviynt different from an OIM, from a ForgeRock, or from a CA Sitefinder. Okay, how are these tools different? And what is the biggest difference? So obviously there are some difference that would be there whenever you are comparing different products, right? There has to be some difference between all of them. But the
Yeah.
biggest difference is that Saviynt is by default a SaaS tool. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I say SaaS tool, it is software as a service,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, what is the good point of having a software as a service tool? The best point about that is that you need not worry about the hardware part. You need not worry about how will my Linux machine is working, or how will I install Saviynt, because simply you're not going to install Saviynt. For installation of Saviynt, Saviynt itself is responsible, not you guys, right? But if you compare it with any other tool, be it OIM, be it SiteMinder, be it ForgeRock, you will have to do the installation, management, support, everything. So
Yeah.
see, basically all these tools, though they have different functionalities, ultimately they are a software, and
Yeah.
all software will run on a server, and they need a virtual machine, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm talking about server, mostly it is going to be Linux server,
Okay.
and then the Linux server will have a virtual machine running on it, which could be different virtual machines, some virtual machine, or let's say the software that these tools runs on. If one of them is called as a WebLogic server. So if you have installed the WebLogic VM, or let's say the WebLogic software over Linux, it becomes a WebLogic server. Okay, but forget about WebLogic. What I'm trying to explain is that you are actually going to install OIM or ForgeRock or CS SiteMinder onto a Linux machine. Then
Okay.
you will have to make sure that the Linux machine is running uh, in a very refined manner. There are no blocked processes. There is no stuck threads, because of which the processing might reduce, right? The productivity of the machine might reduce, and hence you will start seeing some slowness within OIM while you are using it, right? Obviously, there will be upgrades of the Linux machine which will come. There will be security patches of the Linux machine that will also come. So in these products, the difficult part is that you will all, apart from just managing, installing, configuring OIM, you also need to take care of the Linux machine in itself, isn't
Yeah.
it? And this is
Yeah.
not just a one-time activity. This is an activity that you'll have to keep on doing till the time you have implemented OIM, right? So that is the good point within Saviynt, because within Saviynt you need not do any of these things. Within Saviynt, it is a software as a service tool. Saviynt will give you the instance accesses, and you can coldly concentrate on one thing, that is implementing identity and access management. You need not worry about configuring and maintaining Linux machine, right? Or
Yeah.
what is the productivity of their machine, whether your machine is working fast or not. If you see that there is some slowness within the Saviynt tool, you can quickly raise a ticket and tell them that, okay, we are seeing a slowness and please resolve this, and the Saviynt guys will do it for you.
Okay.
So I was part of the Saviynt team, so I know a lot of backend thing, but you need not know that, because ultimately there are no end users who are supposed to do these things. These things are taken care by Saviynt guys themselves.
Okay.
And that is why it is a very easy tool. Otherwise, apart from just Saviynt, I would have been explaining you how it runs on Linux, what is the architecture, how does it interact with the kernel, and so many things. That is not at all needed here. We will just talk about identity and access management. And that is one of the reasons why I prefer Saviynt whenever there is a new person who is learning identity and access management, because in Saviynt, we can concentrate on that. We need not worry about other things. We can just concentrate on our identity and access management core concepts, right? And then the tool itself. Okay. So
Yeah.
basically, these type of implementations are called as on-premise systems. Okay. On-premise, because usually these Linux servers are basically deployed within the company's premises because it stores their users' data, right? Whereas in SaaS tool, there could be two deployment models. One is that it is deployed into, obviously it is deployed into the cloud, but that cloud service. So let's say if you decide to deploy it in Microsoft Azure, the Azure cloud could be of the client or it could be of Saviynt. Okay.
Okay.
And if someone asks you just for the sake of discussion, it is not like that Saviynt cannot be deployed on premises. Okay,
Okay.
it can be deployed on premises by deploying it on a Linux machine as well. But if there is a company whose requirement is that we need it on premise, they should rather choose OIM, ForgeRock, or CA, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you actually don't need the cloud services, why to use a cloud tool? Then use a, I mean, still in case they want to, they can go ahead. It's not, Saviynt doesn't limit you that you cannot do that. It's just
Okay.
that one of the best parts of having Saviynt is that it is a SaaS tool, right?
Okay.
So the last discussion that we're going to have is about this thing. So we discussed that we have HR source. We discussed that the HR will create a new users identity in AD. We will pull that information and all that good stuff. But one thing that we did not discuss enough, was how would Saviynt connect to these applications? Okay. So let's say I sent out an email, I had elongated conversation with the Saviynt team, and the Saviynt team created a Saviynt instance for me. Okay. And I deployed that instance. Now going forward, someone will have to take care of this instance. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, that will be the identity and access management team, you and me. But wa- once Savient has provided us this instance or this tool,
Yeah.
now my work starts. Now I have to start connecting the Savient with different application that my client has, right? So how do I do these connections? How do I connect to these application? How do I do reconciliation and provisioning? For that, so basically, when you want to connect to any application, you need something called as a connector.
Okay.
Okay. So the good point is that connectors come by default out of the box within Savient.
Okay.
Okay. So what happens is now if I want to connect, so see what happens is, and this is common, this is not only specific to Savient, all the other tools, even the other tools that I was talking about. Yeah. So any of the tool that I'm talking about right now, yeah, here it is. Be it Savient, Forge, or any one of those, all these tools have connectors. Okay.
Okay.
And all these tools have almost the same connectors. There could be slight differences, but more or less it is the same. So which connectors will come as part of Savient? See, from an enterprise perspective, you can never judge what an enterprise would be using. Okay. So some companies might use Outlook, the other companies use Gmail, some other companies might use product of a different company altogether. So you cannot have a predefined connector for all of them.
Yeah.
Okay, because there could be any number of permutation and combination in that. So what they do is companies provide three type of connectors. One is called as a default connector, okay, or out of the box OOTB connector. Okay, so OOTB connector means that there are companies like Outlook, let's say applications like Outlook, which is a very common. Almost if not every, 95% of the companies in the world uses Outlook for their emails. Okay,
Okay.
within enterprise. Then you have Salesforce. Again, if not 95, at least 90% of the companies use Salesforce by default. Then
Yeah.
you have Box. Then you have Success. These are common applications which almost every other company uses. So for
Okay.
these connectors, it makes sense for Saviynt or for any IDM tool to provide these connectors by default. Okay. So
Okay.
if you have these connectors by default, you'll be able to connect to these applications very easily and in a very fast manner. Okay,
Okay.
because they're already present out of the box. There could be another type of connector which is called as technology connectors or generic connectors. What are generic connectors? So basically, if you if you want to, if you are using a different application which your company itself has developed, and that is why other companies are not using it or and not don't even know about it.
Okay.
But let's consider that your application exposes some sort of APIs. Okay. So if you understand Java, you might already know what APIs are, but APIs are nothing but application programming interfaces.
Yeah.
Whenever there is an application which wants to interact with a different application over the internet, APIs is the simplest way of doing it. So within APIs, there is something called as a REST API, there is something called as a SCIM API, there is something called as a SOAP API. These are different terminologies or different technologies, right? Different type of APIs that are present. Right now, even if you don't understand it, it is fine. I'm just trying to give you a concept that you can, these are generic technologies which you can use to establish a connection with Saviynt of the application that either you have created or your company uses. But for this application, an out of the box connector is not there. Okay. So for Outlook, Salesforce, Box, SuccessFactors, for these out of the box connector was there. You had a different application which is not that common within the industry, and that is why there is no connector within Saviynt to connect to that application. So what will we do in in this case? We will use a technology connector, which is, let's say, if your application exposes some APIs. Okay. So in that case, what I will do is I will use the API connector that is REST API connector or SCIM connector
Yeah.
or SOAP connector. Okay. So I do not have a default connector for your application, but still I can connect to your application because I believe that there has to be some technology through which I can connect to you. Now let's consider that I'm saying that this application, this specific application is a very old application, 40 years old application.
Okay.
Back then there was no REST API, no SCIM API, no SOAP API. How would I connect to that application? For that application, I can ask the application owner, do you have a database? Okay. Because obviously if you're running a software, that software will be storing the user data into some database. So
Yeah.
rather than connecting it through the APIs, I can connect to the database directly and start managing your new users, let's say identities from there. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's consider the application owner says that, okay, I do have a database, but it is too critical. I cannot give access to the database to you. Okay, that is not secure. In that case, what I can do, I can again propose them, okay, you cannot give me the database access, but can you at least give me a flat file? Okay. So
Yeah.
or a CSV file. So within that CSV file, I will put all the new users data. You can pick that CSV file up and create all the new users into your application as well. And similarly, I will when I have to reconcile data from your application, you can put the users information into the CSV file and I will pick it from there, right? So
Yeah.
you have to come up with solutions. Apart from that, so whatever scenarios we have discussed, mostly nothing goes beyond this. Okay.
Okay.
Normally, all the applications have APIs, which makes it really easy to connect to. Otherwise, we might suggest them some other uh, legacy options, okay, to connect to their applications. Now, these are out of the box connectors. These are generic connectors. But if there is a connector, if there is a target application which exposes APIs or which exposes a Java code or it exposes the database, but it is in a very different format. It is designed very differently as compared to the normal enterprise scenarios. So in
Okay.
that case, what I will do is I will have to write my own connector to handle such circumstances. and that
Okay.
is called as a custom connector. Okay, so these are the only three type of connectors that can exist. There could be
Okay.
an out-of-the-box connector, which is predefined. There could be a generic connector, which we can define, or worst case scenario, we might have to write a custom connector using Java code.
Okay.
Again, so 60% of the time you will be dealing with out-of-the-box connector. 35% time you will be dealing with generic connectors. Only 5% or even less than that you'll have to write a custom connector. Part
Okay.
of the reason is that uh, writing custom connector was very prevalent in older identity and access management tools, let's say Oracle Identity Manager or ForgeRock, right?
Okay.
But in Saviynt, they have tried to reduce these chances as much as they could, because firstly, there are SaaS tools. Secondly, they don't want to code. They don't want you to code. And thirdly, because you do not have the backend access of the tool itself, even if you write the custom connector, where will you deploy it, right? So ultimately, you will have to hand over your code to them and tell them how to deploy it, or rather, they will deploy it on your behalf. Anyways, it is quite tricky, right? So
Yeah.
that is why most of the time we will try to avoid the custom connector thing, and we will
Okay.
try to work with the with the application team to figure out a solution between out-of-the-box connector or generic connectors. Okay.
Okay.
So don't get overwhelmed with what I'm explaining you. The only reason I'm explaining you this here is because once I start talking specifically about Savient, there are a
Yeah.
lot of things which will start making a lot of sense for you because we have already covered it, right?
Mm.
Otherwise, if you understand everything separately, okay, because in one session, if I'm only talking about installing Saviynt, the second session I talk about connect Saviynt, third load user data, you would not able to connect it together, okay, because we are going to have sessions over the weekends or maybe with gap of 2 3 days, right? So you
Yeah.
will not be able to paint a complete picture of what we are trying to do, and that is why I'm explaining you everything together, and going forward I will explain you everything independently. Okay.
Okay. I have a small question
Good.
about the connectors.
Hmm.
Like we spoken about reconciliation. Like we are going to import data from the
Hmm.
HR source, right, to the
Mhm.
Savient. That is called the trusted reconciliation.
Correct.
And a connector.
Hmm.
Suppose if you want to import data from existing applications like
Mhm.
Outlook,
Mhm.
so in such a case only we use connector, right?
No, in every case, because see, how will Savient talk to these applications? If I have
Okay.
to create a new account as well, I need to have a connection between Savient and let's say Salesforce or Outlook. Only
Okay.
then I can create a new user's account. So if Deepa joins a company, the HR will create her account in Active Directory. I will
Okay.
pull that information from Active Directory into Savient. And
Okay.
now because I want to create an account for Deepa because she's new to the company, I will provision her account. But
Okay.
to provision an account, I need to firstly able to talk to Savient, sorry, Outlook, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that connection, it's gets established through the connector. So the
Okay.
connector is responsible for establishing the connection, for creating the account, for reconciling the account, everything. And
Okay.
that is the reason a lot of work that we will do actually within the engagement is about configuring connectors,
Okay.
maintaining connectors, right, and customizing connectors. So that's the work that we actually do in day-to-day life.
Okay. Suppose if any application wants to talk with Savient, we need a connector.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can go ahead.
Okay. Yep. So I have talked enough of, okay. So I think we have built our basics enough.
Yeah.
Now what I'm going to do is to start talking about Savient itself. Okay. So basically there are 8 separate sessions that we are going to have, either 8 or maybe we can try to have some discussions in the same day. But anyways, so we
Yeah.
have 6 basic labs that we'll be following. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll start with the first one, and these all the labs are from Savient themselves. Okay.
Okay.
So I think that's the best way of doing it, to learn it from the horse's mouth. But yeah. So the first thing that we're going to do is we'll understand that how do we do this trusted reconciliation thing? How do we configure everything? Okay.
Okay.
So we'll start from there. So Deepa, do you want to do it? Yeah, I think let's have it some initial discussion. I won't overload you with information, but I'll
Okay.
give you a background. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, this is how the login screen of Saviynt looks like usually. Okay.
Okay.
This is how Saviynt looks like. Whenever your identity gets created in a company, you will get some credentials which will include the username and password of Saviynt itself, or you can use the company's credentials. Let's say ad.com along with your password, you can use that to log into Saviynt in
Okay.
case it is using Saviynt, of course.
Okay.
Okay. So within Saviynt, now see, from a conceptual perspective, I've explained you everything. Now we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of things. Okay. So I'm saying that the first thing after getting the Saviynt instances that I want to do is to import user data. How do we import existing users' data? We will import it from the HR source as we discussed, right?
Yeah.
So before we can do that, we need to make some configurations. Before uploading data into the HR source, or sorry, into Saviynt, we will
Okay.
go to something called as a global configuration. What
Okay.
is global configurations? So as I mentioned that before we start pulling in information, you would like to create some prerequisite. You would like to prepare Saviynt, do all the configuration settings that are required before you start pulling in data from the HR source. So
Okay.
for that, what you can do is you can go to global configurations, and within global configuration, you have something called as a system username generation rule. What is that? So see, the Active Directory has existed for 35 or 40 years. Okay.
Okay.
There could be some rule that they have already created which defines a user uniquely. Okay.
Okay.
So let's say if there is a Deepa that is part of the company, there could be 12 other people with the same first name and last name. You need a
Okay.
unique identifier to identify them, right?
Yeah.
So you will have to define something which is unique key, which is a primary key for that user.
Yeah.
So that is basically called as the username, system username. Okay.
Yeah.
So if the system already has that, and by system I mean Active Directory. If the
Okay.
Active Directory already have a unique key and you want to use the same one, you can mention the same attribute here that okay, I want to make this attribute as my system username, which means the
Okay.
unique username for each user.
Okay.
But if I do not have that within Active Directory, or if I'm not happy with the quality of data in terms
Okay.
of that the company says, if you go to the current identity and access management team of my client, they will
Okay.
tell you, no, 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 we do have a unique attribute, and this is their email. But then when
Okay.
you start going through Active Directory, you see that okay, they are saying that there is a attribute like that, but I see that there are two people with the same email address, right? So the
Okay.
data is inconsistent, and you can see that. So in that case, what you can tell them that is that we are going to create a new unique username for all these users. Okay.
Okay.
And obviously you are not going to do it manually because you don't want to do anything manually, right? So
Okay.
what you can do is you will define a system username generation rule. Okay.
Okay.
So what will you do for that is you will go to global configuration, you will go to home, you will go to system username generation rule, and you will click on add rule. Once you click on add rule, this type of window will appear.
Okay.
Okay. And here you can either choose a default attribute which is already present in Active Directory, right?
Yeah.
Or you can define a advanced rule. So in my
Okay.
case, I want to configure an advanced rule. So
Okay.
what is the advanced rule? We are saying I want to concatenate the first alphabet from the first name followed by a dash, and then let's say I want to have 5 middle units from first to fourth alphabet. I want to define a substring.
Okay.
Okay. And this will create a separate a unique username for each user. Okay.
Okay.
So this is just an example, but you can define any unique SQL query that creates a unique username for every user that is created. If
Okay.
you don't want to do that, you can simply say that, okay, we already have a username attribute within Active Directory. So from
Okay.
the drop down, just choose username and click on save. Okay.
Okay.
They have just told you about that we have a capability in case you want to define a more complex way of creating a unique username. Okay. So don't get overwhelmed with this. Okay.
Okay.
See, this is what I was telling you about. So the way we had a the way we had system username generation rule, we also have the capability of defining an email generation rule. Okay. So let's say
Okay.
for some users, the email ID is not configured. But
Okay.
going forward, our client has told that we want all the users to have at least one email ID, right?
Okay.
So in that case, we need to define an email generation rule as well. So what
Okay.
you need to do, you can click on add rule, and this time we'll take a simpler example. So we clicked on add rule, and then from the drop down, we chose system username. Okay. So what is
Okay.
the system username? We'll save that, and that will get created, or that will create the user's email address. Okay.
Okay.
So in this case, we are considering that the system username in itself is in the form of @something.com, @domain.com. Okay.
Okay.
So you can define that. So once we are defining it at a global configuration level, it gets applicable to all the applications, right?
Okay.
That we are dealing with for Salesforce, SuccessFactors, about everything. If you
Okay.
don't want to do that, and if you want to do it at an application level, you can do that as well. Okay. If it is not making sense, don't push too hard on it, right? Because this is just our second session. We are going to have at least 10, 12 more sessions. And
Okay.
as we go ahead, you'll get to understand more things. Okay.
Yeah.
So don't get overwhelmed with that. Anyways, so the second thing that we are going to do is obviously to import data. So when I'm talking about importing data, how can I import data directly if I don't want to use a connector? Just give me a second. Okay. So there are 2, 3 ways of creating a user. Okay. Before we go there, I'll also tell you one more thing, and I think this is the final concept from theoretical perspective that I need to cover. That whenever you are creating a user's identity from a trusted source, that is called as I mentioned, user identity. Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas whenever I'm creating their account in any target application, it is called as a user account, right?
Yeah.
So basically, what I'm saying by this is that a user can have only one user identity, but the user can have multiple accounts,
Yeah.
right? Because a user will have an Outlook account, they will have Salesforce account, Box account, SuccessFactors account, but
Yeah.
their identity is going to remain only one. That is,
Yeah.
identity is Deepa, and her accounts are Salesforce account, Outlook account, Box account, all that good stuff, right?
Yes.
So right now, because I'm right now talking about only one thing, I'll focus there. That is, right now I'm talking about creating users. By
Yeah.
users, I mean user identity. Because right now our instance is empty. It doesn't have any users information. So
Okay.
what I'm going to do is I will click on admin, I will
Yeah.
click on users, and from there we have something called as actions. I will click on actions, and I will click on upload user.
Okay.
Okay. And when I click on upload user, there is a new window which will open like this. Okay.
Yeah.
So it will ask me that, okay, you want to upload user, but where do you want to upload the users from? So I will choose that I have a file called as lab1 users flat file for .csv, which have all the users information stored in it. And from there, I want to upload users into Saviynt. Okay. It can ask me what is a delimiter. I tell them that, okay, comma is a delimiter. There are certain more options as well here. One option is first row is heading. Yes, first row is heading, right? Then you have 0-day provisioning. What is 0-day provisioning? As I mentioned in my examples as well, there are certain accesses that you will get by default based on certain rules. Okay, so let's
Okay.
say if you're part of sales team and your designation is consultant, you should get access to Salesforce, because obviously a Salesforce consultant cannot do his job without getting access to Salesforce itself. If
Yeah.
you are a Java developer, you cannot develop code without an IDE, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these are default logical things that has to be configured, right? So those are called as 0-day provisioning. So we can define these rules by default, that based on these attributes of the user, if this is true, give access to that application. If this
Yeah.
is true, give access to that application. That makes our job easier, because then the person who has joined the company today can get access to these application today itself. Otherwise, when you join a company, it takes at least 10-15 days for your accesses to be configured. Your manager will say that, okay, I have raised a ticket, but it has not yet created. The IT people are not responding and stuff like that. In case you have an identity and access management tool, most of these accesses would be given on day one itself, right?
Okay.
Which is the whole point of having an IDM tool. Apart from security, it is also efficiency that is improving. Okay. Then it might ask you that, okay, we are uploading these users, but do you want to generate a username for them? Do you want to use, right now we just configured the system generation, the user generation rule, right? System username generation rule. So that is what you want to use? Yes. Whether you want to generate email for the user? Yes. Whether you want to check rules, there are other rules as well apart from the ones that we talked about. Do you want to evaluate those as well? I will say no. Okay, and then I will click on upload and preview. Before I click on that, I'll show you the exact file. Okay, lab1 user flat file .csv. Just give me a second. So this is how the file might look, the CSV file that I was talking about. It has a username, which is a unique value. It has a first name column. It has a last name column. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. It might already have email as well. It has status key, which is, let's say, 1 means active, 0 means inactive. What type of employee is it? Is it a full-time employee or it is a contractor? Who is the manager of the person? What is the job description code? What is the department? What is the passport issue? I mean, there could be many other attributes as well, right? We
Yeah.
need not worry about all these attributes while creating users in Saviynt. We might only want to manage limited attributes, right?
Yeah.
So username, first name, last name, email, status key, employee type, and manager. But let's say we don't want to manage the passport issuing country or city or cost center, etc. So we can choose what we want to manage. So this is a file through which we want to create users. And while we are uploading the file, we are also making sure that all the rules that we have configured gets evaluated for all these users. The users gets a username or email as they need, right? Now, when I clicked on this upload and preview, right?
Yes.
I'll be able to see, and Saviynt is very good in that. Saviynt will automatically map some of the attributes which is present in the flat file with the corresponding attributes in Saviynt. Because if you think about it, when I'm importing data from flat file, Saviynt also need to store this data somewhere. Where will it store this user's data? It will store it in some database, right? But we will have to do that mapping that, okay, whatever information is present in this particular column, let's say my first column is username, store this information into the username attribute of Saviynt. The first name should get stored in the first name attribute of Saviynt. Last name should get stored in last name. Email should get stored in email. So it will get automatically mapped. Okay. In other tools, you would have to define this that, okay, my flat file says that my first column is username, but the tool will ask you that, okay, this column should be stored in which column of the IDM tool, and you'll have to do that manually. Saviynt understands most of them by default. Okay. But let's say if there is a new attribute, names XY, how would Saviynt understand it? There is no way Saviynt can understand it. So in that case, you can define a new property within Saviynt itself, right? So if you see, all of these existed from the starting: employee type, manager, job description, code, department name. Saviynt was expecting these attributes, but custom properties, but this one, Saviynt was not able to understand. So it gave an option called as custom property one. So by custom property, it means that if you want to define a new attribute, you can do that. Okay, because I'm not able to understand what is this attribute. Okay, so we can do that. So from the drop down, we can change that to country, let's say, in case you want to. So basically what you can do, you can click on the drop down. There is an option called as create new. Click on that and name it as country. Once you are satisfied with all the mappings and you see that, okay, data is coming up correctly according to my flat file, you can click on import now. Okay. Once you click on import now, this is what you will see. So you will see that there were total number of records in the flat file was 2,511. Out of those, there have been new users which have been created in Saviynt, that is 2,510, and one user has been updated. Which user would be updated? which already existed within Saviynt. Okay.
Yeah.
So if there was any users which already exist in Saviynt, those information might get updated. Obviously, they will not get created because they
Okay.
existed, right?
Yeah.
So now what we have done is we were able to import a lot of users within Saviynt, almost 2,511. Now, if you want to see whether the users that I imported came into Saviynt or not, you can go to admin again. Let me go back to the main screen here. So you can click on admin, you can click on users, and here you have a search bar. So you can search for any of the users that you saw here. Okay. And see whether it actually got imported within Saviynt or not, right? So
Yeah.
you'll be able to see those users. Also, you can see that the system username will get generated according to the logic that you have defined.
Okay.
First alphabet of the first name, 5 attributes of the last name, followed by a dash and then a unique key. Something like that, right? Whatever you would like to define. So you can do that. And then now we'll talk about application onboarding Active Directory. So as I discussed, whenever you have these applications that you want to connect to, right? This process in itself is called as application onboarding. Okay. So when I'm using a connector to establish connection with the target application. I'm basically onboarding that application into Saviynt. Again, it's from a logical perspective. Practically, you cannot do that. But from a logical perspective, we call it as application onboarding. And that is what in every interview, the interviewer is going to ask you, have you
Okay.
onboarded application? So when he says onboarding application, he basically means, have you used a connector to establish connection with a target application? And have you provisioned and reconciled data using that connector? Okay.
Okay.
Why is it called as application onboarding? Because basically, see, if I want to create an account in Outlook, within
Okay.
Saviynt, I need to have a logical representation of Outlook. Okay. So what I can do is I will choose a user, let's say Deepa's identity, and I will click on plus key. And by clicking on plus key, I will be showed, I will see a host of application, Outlook, Success Factors, Box, all of those applications. And I can choose in which application do I want to create an account for Deepa, and then click on submit, and the account will get created, right? But you were able to see that list of applications, right? Success Factors, Outlook, Box. So what is that? That is nothing but a logical representation. It is not that it is actually Salesforce. It is just a logical separation that we have created, or that we can choose to create an account on the target application. And that is why it is called as application onboarding, because you will start seeing that application only once you have configured it. Okay.
Yeah.
And that is what we are going to do for the client. Because see, what happens is at an enterprise level, I'm giving you example of 5 applications. Every enterprise uses at least 500 to 700 applications today. So for onboarding these applications and connecting these applications to Saviynt, it is not a very easy task for them, because those are not technology companies. TCS, Wipro, Infosys, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, these are technology companies. You
Okay.
and me are engineers, right? So we can understand technical aspects.
Yeah.
Someone from the sales team or from a FMCG or from a manufacturing company cannot understand it. And that is why they want people like us to onboard these applications onto Saviynt, so that going forward, they can manage their users from a single standpoint, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll take a pause here and I'll take application onboarding from the next session onwards. Otherwise, it will become too much information for today.
Yeah.
Right?
Actually, last 10 minutes, I felt like little confusing. Whatever you were
I know.
explaining.
Also, don't forget it. Forget it. Whatever you are feeling confusing with, just forget it. Because to be frank, usually I would not have covered anything more than what you're seeing on the slide right now. Okay.
Okay.
But I covered the Savient part because you might start feeling that, okay, we have been talking about a lot of stuff, but we haven't even started discussing Savient yet. So I discussed Savient just for the sake of it. Otherwise, starting 2 to 3 sessions, we should not even talk about Savient because it is just about concept building, right?
Okay.
Yeah. But if you have any questions, you can certainly ask that. But if it is confusing to you, don't feel confused, because as I was telling you, from the next session when we start with application onboarding,
Okay.
everything that I've explained you till now will start making sense, because you'll be able to correlate that. Okay, he explained that, and that is where we are using it. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the global configuration part we started now.
Yeah.
So
See,
that part.
I tell you what. So what happens is there are certain configurations which are specific to the application that we are dealing with. So as I told you about Outlook, for Outlook, we need a separate connector. We will make all the configurations. We will configure APIs, etc. and everything, right? But those configurations are only specific to our integration with Outlook, Savient's integration with Outlook. But there are certain configurations which are specific to Savient itself, right? And it will affect not only one application but all the applications that are connected to Savient, and that is why it is called as a global configuration, right? Because it is applicable to the entire Savient instance and not only some connections or some configurations. That is why they are called as global configurations. For now you can forget it. Once we started onboarding applications, when you see what application, how are we onboarding applications, what are the configuration changes that we are making to onboard application, you will start understanding that okay, we make those configuration only in context to some connectors, right? But the global configurations are applicable to all the connectors.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll take a pause here. Okay, I'll rather